Well, thanks so much for hosting to BayREN, and it was great to hear all the presentations that preceded me. They make my job easy because many of you probably were already caught up on some of these issues, but it saves me from having to attempt to define esoteric terms regarding things like the electrical code and breaker panels. I want to say not just thanks to BayREN, but I think, many of us have been talking about these issues as part of a convening that Build It Green runs called the Power Group. And of course, a big nod to Tom and his colleagues over at Redwood Energy, who I think really have been key in getting the ball rolling for people thinking about these issues. I'm Laura Feinstein. I'm Sustainability and Resilience Policy Director at SPUR. We're a Bay Area-based public policy think tank. And I'm going to be talking today about addressing panels through policy, really thinking about how policymakers can be encouraging the use of a lot of these strategies to optimize panels. Optimizing panels, avoiding costly panel and service upgrades is really a least regrets strategy to help us meet our building decarbonization goals. So first, why we've been talking a lot about, how do you electrify without touching the panel, without touching your electrical service? And I just want to take a step back and sort of talk about why this is such a critical strategy. So first, we have these ambitious climate goals as well as clean air goals. And the state has made pretty amazing progress in terms of cleaning up the grid. You can see here that this is the goal for the state's 2050 carbon emissions. And those arrows marked in blue are those sectors where California is well on track or actually speeding ahead of its goals in terms of reducing emissions. So we've got a grid that is rapidly cleaning up. In other sectors, though, we are not on track to meet our goals. And in particular, buildings really stand out as a sector where we're lagging behind on meeting carbon emission goals. So clearly, we need to step up the pace on cleaning up emissions from buildings. We have this challenge, which is there's a real bottleneck in energization programs. So to define that, or energization projects, I should say. So to define that really quickly, energization is extending an electricity line or expanding distribution infrastructure to service new or expanded customer load. So when we've been talking about electric service upgrades, this is a type of energization project for the utilities. People often just refer to any kind of electric service upgrade or new connection as interconnection, but technically, at least the CPUC says interconnection is adding a linkage to new generation or storage capacity. When you're connecting to a customer, that's an energization project. And there is a huge bottleneck in energization projects right now in California. The bottleneck is especially severe in PG&E territory. We see, for example, examples of these are electric semi-trucks that are just sitting unused on the lot. They've been bought and paid for. And the companies that purchase them told the vendor just to keep them because they don't have any way to get their EV chargers powered. This is an affordable housing building that was built in San Francisco, and it is sitting empty. They can't complete the project because it has no power. So, projects have been grossly delayed because of a problem in energization, and that includes when people go to electrify their homes and they decide they need to upsize their panel. That then triggers electrical service upsizing, and that can cost, sometimes it's just the cost of a new panel, but sometimes customers do have to cover the cost of certain components of the electrical service upsizing as well. So customers sometimes get hit with costs as high as $46,000. And these projects of electrical service upsizing take in the range of 8 weeks to sometimes 9 months, according to this NV5 and Redwood Energy report from 2022. And anecdotally, I think a lot of people have been hearing that it's really taking longer than 9 months to do electrical service upsizing. And at the same time, we don't have a great sense of how often customers are responsible for these very high costs. A lot of people, when they do the electrical service upsizing, they don't have to pay anything. In other circumstances, they pay a lot. And we don't have a great sense of, is it like 1% of customers that are paying tens of thousands of dollars, or is it 25% of customers? We know the range is big, and we don't quite know the distribution of where customers fall in that range of both costs and timeline. So, we could sort of take some rough estimates at how often people are going to be faced with a potential panel and electrical service upsizing project when they electrify their homes. So this is some data here collected from a few energy efficiency and home electrification programs in the state. I compiled all of them and took a look at what panel capacity people had in their homes prior to participating in the program. And this is really kind of a best case scenario of what types of electrical panel capacity people have in their homes. It's very likely that people who participate in these programs probably are in more modern homes with higher capacity panels. But this is sort of our best case scenario, and it still looks worrying. So, in California, there's 13 million housing units. This is single and multifamily combined. About half of them have 200 amp panels, according to these data sets anyway. A little less than half are in the range of 100 to 199 amps, and really small percentage are in this under 100 amp capacity. So as we've been kind of hearing from Abhijit and from Tom, usually a home is able to electrify comfortably if it has a 200 amp panel. There's going to be a few cases. People have a really big home. They have some unusually high power needs, and they may need to go over this. But, those people are usually, people in really large homes, people with pools, the kind of thing where if they want to go over 200 amps, okay, but it's not really, I would say, the responsibility, for example, for incentive programs to help cover those costs. And then the people who have homes with panels under 100 amps, there's going to be small homes and multifamily units where that's going to be just fine. They can electrify on those very small panels. But in most cases, people with panels under 100 amps are going to want to go up in capacity a bit. And then really what we're focused on are these homes, a good half of them most likely, that have panels that are in the 100 to 199 amp range. And that's where all these strategies that we've been talking about with the watt diet and so on come into play, because you really can comfortably electrify on a panel of 100 amps if you make the right choices. But your choices really matter if you're in this space. So, we're potentially talking about 6.5 million homes where policymakers have a lot of leverage to kind of determine the outcome of whether we see most of them upsizing or whether we see relatively few of those homes upsizing. And, getting this right and making the process of electrifying as inexpensive and as fast as possible is an urgent issue right now. Here in the Bay Area, the Air District has passed rules that will require homeowners to start to switch over to heat pump water heaters in 2027, heat pump HVAC systems in 2029. And at the same time, we have this huge influx of funding coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, from the California budget, as well as our local CCAs and BayREN, that are offering huge subsidies to help people electrify. And yet, at the same time, if homes need to electrify, they can often get the cost of a new panel covered, but they can't get the cost of electrical service upsizing covered. Not to mention, it's a huge inconvenience if you have to kind of go back and forth on the permitting and wait for months. So we have this real risk where, we have a huge amount of money coming to help people electrify, and people don't take advantage of it because the electrical service upsizing problem is standing in their way. So with that in mind, we have 3 strategies for policymakers to try to streamline the process and reduce panel and service upsizing when possible. And the 3 big strategies are to encourage panel optimization, or Watt diet, whichever term you prefer, streamline those cases where panel and service upsizing are called for, and resolve some of our knowledge gaps around this issue. So first in line, in terms of how to encourage panel optimization, it's important to encourage strategic use of the electrical code. As we were just hearing, often using section 220.87, which relies on understanding the actual peak demand of a particular housing unit, will often yield in the end a lower estimate of your required panel capacity. But it's actually not always true. It sort of depends on circumstances. So we really need incentive programs, to say, if you're going to go ahead and take advantage of money we're offering to upsize your panel, please show us that you use both of these sections to arrive, and that both of them are pointing towards the need for panel upsizing. Make sure that, that contractors are tapping into that money only if they've sort of done due diligence and used both sections. We need to offer more workforce education on panel optimization strategies and how to navigate the electrical code, and work with building inspectors on panel issues to help educate them on some of these thorny issues around the electrical code and its interpretation. And the right entities to step in on that are those that are already doing a lot of workforce education, like BayREN here, Tech Clean California. The utilities and unions all do a lot of workforce education. Utilities should be providing information on peak demand for every customer. This would enable easy and accurate use of the electrical code section 220.87, the section that relies on actual measured use in a given home. Oftentimes contractors run into problems using that section because there's certain authorities having jurisdiction don't accept metered data, like the advanced metering infrastructure data on energy use, because of some ambiguities in the code that really need to get solved, as well as, it also sort of requires the contractors to do some additional calculations. It would be quite easy to take for the utilities to take their data and just like you can download your 15-minute interval data from the utility, just give people their peak demand over the last, year, ideally, or as long a period as you have for that customer.
Hi, Laura, you've got about 2 minutes.
Okay. We also need to do some amendments to the National Electrical Code. There's some baked-in biases towards overestimating load more than is really necessary to protect safety. And Brennan Less at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab has been the real leader on identifying those places where there's some good opportunities to remove unnecessary overestimates. This is really up to the National Fire Protection Association, or, we do have California state agencies with authority over the electrical code. They don't usually deviate from what the NFPA says, but they do have the option to when they have an important policy priority like this. And there's a need also for the Building Standards Commission, until we can hopefully get the language cleared up in the electrical code itself, for them to issue some guidance on a few sections in the electrical code where there's a lot of ambiguous language, and the wrong interpretation can really lead you towards oversizing the electrical panel. We also have a need for advanced planning and electrification to help people kind of make the right choices early on, as Tom Cabot was talking about. One opportunity to do that would be that cities and counties can start to require advanced planning for electrification. This is most relevant in larger buildings where usually they're expected to have asset management plans. And you can ask them to go ahead and develop an asset management plan that assumes they're going to be electrifying over the next few years. And incentive programs currently, many of them are subsidizing a new larger panel. We really need them to also subsidize technologies like circuit splitters that help mitigate the need for a larger panel, as well as offer some additional incentives for using the most power efficient equipment. And, you know, I'm going to kind of skip over this. There's more. There's a publication coming soon, and you can read these later when the slides come out. But I'm going to also just comment. I guess I'll comment real quickly on a few of these. So, you know, we do have homes where in most cases, they're going to need to upsize that panel and electrical service, meaning homes that have, I would say, single family homes that have panels under 100 amps. Right now, you know, they can't get a subsidy to upsize their panel until they're doing an electrification project, which triggers that need. I think it would be wise to go ahead and say, you can, if you have a panel under 100 amps, you can go ahead and take advantage of incentives to upsize your panel, just so that you can do that work before, for example, you're trying to do an emergency replacement of your furnace or your water heater. And we also have this situation, of course, where some customers are being hit with very high costs for electrical service upsizing. I think we really need a study to better understand how often customers are paying extremely high costs, and then to evaluate what the impact would be to rates of spreading those costs over ratepayers, meaning that utilities would be covering the costs that they're currently charging to customers through their rate base. It's very possible that, you know, a few people get hit with these really extreme costs, but it's not many of them, and spreading those costs across all utility customers would not have a huge impact on rates. And with that, I want to wrap up and say thank you.